And that shows you that the gap between them is getting larger. This is reshaping global capitalism and all world affairs. We are living through that, but I think the important thing is to realize that this is what's going on, to understand that every country in the world, your country, my country, all are now rethinking their foreign policies, their place in the world, the future of their industries, because the economic situation of the world economy is changing so dramatically. I'm here to tell you that it's not the only solution, that the Federal Reserve, in acting in that way, shortcut what should have been the debate. How do we deal with the inflation that the employer class has imposed on us? And we might have then remembered, and I remind people, we might have remembered that a conservative Republican, Richard Nixon, on the 15th of August, 1971, confronting an inflation then, made the following decision, which he announced on TV. As of tomorrow morning, any company that raises its price, we will come for you, we will arrest you, and we will throw you in the clink. And any union that raises your wages or tries to, we will do the same. He declared what came to be known as a wage price freeze. Did it stop the inflation? On a dime, right away, real quick. Did it raise interest rates? No. It chose an alternative policy. A quarter of the electric cars on the road in Europe are the Chinese cars. The greatest producer, the most successful, the most rapidly growing car company in the world, most Americans have never heard of. It has 3 initials, B as in boy, Y, and D as in dog. BYD Corporation. The response of the United States is to freeze them out. This is self-defeating and, to be an economist for a moment, stupid. Why? Everywhere else in the world, as the transition to electric vehicles is underway, every competitor of the United States across all industries will be able to buy the best car at $30,000 with which to compete with the American company, whereas the American company is going to have to pay more than $30,000 for the non-tariff equivalent, which will cost you $40,000 to $50,000 for an inferior vehicle. Inflation means that prices in general are going up. Not all of them the same rate. Some of them can go down, but the general direction of prices is up. That's all the word inflation means. Okay, step 2 in the logic. If rising prices are an inflation, the next question is, who determines the prices? Answer, employers determine prices. Everyone listening or watching this program knows that if you're an employee, you've never been called into a room to participate in setting prices. That's done by the boss. That's done by the corporate board of directors, the leading managers. It's a tiny group of people. In our country, the U.S. Census Department lists employers 3% of our population. The other 97% are not. Let's be honest. 3% set the prices, 97% pay them and don't set them. Okay, there's no democracy in an inflation. A tiny group of people never elected to the job, which doesn't exist. It's simply understood that if you're an employer, you set the price. You raise it, you lower it, you keep it the same, your business. Okay, so when inflation means employers made the decision. Why did they raise prices? Answer, the same reason they do everything else, to maximize their profits. That's what makes a business successful. The United States currently maintains somewhere between 700 and 800 bases abroad. And the entity that does that is the Department of Defense. All of that, we are told, and the whole world is told, is done for defense. Is there a defense component in it? Sure. But is there an offensive component? Equally sure. That's how you guarantee the dominance of the United States in its empire since the end, at least, of World War II, if not some years before. They're not never there, but they are the ones that we dream about, but we don't invest in. They don't do that. When they talk, they say, is profit important to us? Yes. Is it the beginning and the end of the conversation? Oh, no, not the bottom line. It is one among a set of objectives, and our strategy is focused on all those objectives, not the prioritization of private profit. I understand that the negotiation is difficult, But going into more war is not only not a solution, it's the one that's already failed, piling on more. It's like that sorry political candidate who believes that every time a criticism is made, you double down and do more of it. The earlier incursions used the same argument that you're using now. They were defensive, and they would, quote, put an end to these hostilities. It's the military brain thinking that when you win the war, you're done. All the smartest military brains, from Clausewitz on down, have understood war is just politics by another form. What the Chinese did was to mobilize, borrow from the rest of the world, no question, but put all that together in a successful mix. If your measuring rod is economic growth, lifting people out of poverty, and let's remember, 1.4 billion people, 4 to 5 times the population of the United States. They were able to do it. Not only that, they now compete with the United States at the highest levels of technology. What we get from Intel or Apple, they have their equivalent. And in some cases, they're already ahead of us. I'll give you an example. 10 or 15 years ago, every major car-producing company in the world took a program to develop the electric car, the electric vehicle, to replace the fossil fuel burning oil and gas vehicle. And we have many examples of that being produced. However, one example outranks everybody else. The electric cars of China are better and cheaper than anybody else's. They won the competition. That happens all the time. Other companies in other countries at other times won equivalent competitions. The response of the United States has been to impose a tariff to make the better, cheaper electric car from China unaffordable. The current rate of tariff applied by the Biden government is 100. For example, if the electric car from China costs you $30,000 that have to be sent to China to pay for the car, you've got to give them to the car dealer $30,000 to pay off the Chinese, and another $30,000, 100%, goes to Uncle Sam, so that the cost to an American would be $60,000 for that $30,000 car. Okay? There are no electric cars from China on the road in the United States. Mr. Putin in Russia made clear, and ironically, he was quite right. He said, the deal that I can make with you, Mr. Zelensky, is much better now at the beginning of our hostilities than it will be if we fight. And that's what's happened. Now they will be much poorer. Mr. Zelensky can't face it. Nobody understood in those days what the Chinese were doing. And in those days, it was only the beginning, and you could be excused for not paying all that much attention. They were one of many very poor countries in the world who were trying to stop being poor countries in the world. Americans might have read the novel by Pearl Buck, The Good Earth. If you ever did read that book, we had to in high school. You learned what the poverty was like. It was, for a suburban kid like me, it was hard to get my head around what that kind of poverty is like. A few years ago, we had shortages. We couldn't get toilet paper. We couldn't get medicines of all kinds. We have shortages right now. The most popular nonsense spoken about shortages in the past was, ready? Supply chain disruptions. Okay, that's a euphemism. That's another way of saying shortages. Now, I can show you shortages across the board, all over the place, virtually every year since 1971. To assign to shortages some sort of role as evidence, at the very least, you'd have to show me that there were more shortages during a time of wage price controls than there were during all those years when there weren't price controls. Century to us, let's call it the Anglo-American, mostly private economic system, private enterprise, private capitalist, profiting, all of that, and bequeathed the Soviet Union. The attempt as an alternative to build it with government-owned and operated enterprises, at least in the industrial sector, not so much in agriculture, but there too. let's call them, for lack of a better, a polar opposite. Then it's not surprising, given how human beings work, that along would come a group of people who have something they don't like about the first one and something they don't like about the second one. And so they conceive the idea, would we get from a hybrid something that would capture the best of the one, the best of the other, and get rid of, discard the parts of both of them that we don't like? You could, I think, make a very good case. That's what Mao Zedong, the Chinese Communist Party, that's what they are. People forget, but they shouldn't, that in the 1960s, Soviet Union and their proteges in China came to war with one another. They did not agree on things that would make them shoot at each other's people and hurt each other. The divisions were very profound. So no one should be surprised that the Chinese made the decision to welcome foreign enterprise. Bring us your technology because you are ahead of us in a dozen ways, which they said. If you read Chinese journals, they've been full of that for years. Much of what those Chinese journals did was to take from the United States and try to figure out how to do the same thing a little bit better. But 9% of what they did was learn from the United States, and they paid for that in all the ways they normally. Nobody stole the tech. That's childish. Nobody put a gun to the heads of the American companies that went over and made the deal. We will give you our technology. We will show it to you. We'll teach it to you. You got to give us the labor. You got to give us access to the market. We're getting profit out of it. You're getting technology. That was the deal. That was a deal on the table, crystal clear. To represent it now is really cheating. It's like my saying, I'm going to give you $5. You give me your shirt. And we make the exchange. You have my $5. I got your shirt. And then I start screaming, he stole my shirt. No, stop. You didn't steal my shirt. We had a deal. You may have changed your mind. You may regret it. That's another matter. But nobody stole anything from you. And the Chinese, they resent that because for them, that's the 100 years of humiliation again. Because what they hear is the subtext. You're too stupid. You're too backward. You're too Chinese to figure these things out. And so you must have stolen. You couldn't have done it without we are the center. And I know where it comes from. For a good long while, the United States was the center of innovation, was the great breakthrough technology. Silicon Valley deserves part of the reputation it has. I get that. But so do the achievements on the basis of that. And if you're honest about Silicon Valley, you'll know that a lot of what they did there was also borrowing things that had been developed elsewhere in the world, as it has always been. I believe that what we're watching is the American empire declining as the British Empire and so many other empires before it declined, engaging in retreat. And here's what I mean. We fought a war in Korea back in the early 1950s. We couldn't finish it. And so Korea was left cut in half to one side, half to the other. In Vietnam, we tried the same game with an already split system because the French weren't strong enough to prevent the cutting of the country the way it happened. And the United States failed again. Only this time the failure was no split country left. Vietnam became a unified country under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Vietnamese Communist Party. In Afghanistan, we were defeated again, and the country is now run by the Taliban, which was the ostensible enemy. I could go on, but I won't. I'll draw the conclusion. You can't do what it is this country sets out to do. It's not within your power. It may have been after World War II. We really were at the top of the mountain at that time, and there's an argument that we were for the rest of the 20th century. But you cannot make that argument now.